to Before You Go, the official podcast of ABODE Contemplative Care for the Dying.
At ABODE, our vision is that we live in a world where death is not feared and we live fully until we die. And we'd like to make that happen before we go. I'm Mary Thorsby, ABODE's CEO.
I'm Natalie Buster, ABODE's end-of-life doula and yoga director. Welcome to Before You Go.
Hey there, Natalie.
Hi, Mary.
Happy day to you.
Good morrow to you, Mary.
Well, it's so great to be back. And as is our ABODE custom, we always like to start any sort of gathering with a contemplative moment just to get ourselves together and make sure we're ready for the special time. And I would like to read a card from the Namaste book pack of cards, blessings and divination cards. Is that how you pronounce that? Divination? Anyway, so here is one of the cards. It's titled A Blessed Heart. If you feel that something is missing, look within and you will find it. What is your heart saying? Your heart is the gateway to your soul, and your soul is the eternal you. Know that you are free, protected, and blessed.
That is such a good card to draw, Mary.
A sweet message.
Did you just draw that, or did you kind of page through the divination cards? And
I went through a couple, and then that one jumped right up. And it's very in keeping with the topic that we'll be discussing today. Of the many gifts that Natalie has brought to ABODE, end-of-life yoga certification is right up there at the top. And in fact, somewhat how we met, certainly under the philosophy of yoga. So Natalie launched our first cohort of students this summer, and we thought it'd be fun to talk about that today. So Natalie, tell us how you got involved in end-of-life yoga and what it is. Most people think of those beautiful pretzel poses and Lululemon tights, but it's so much more than that. Tell us a bit about that.
yeah, so for as long as I can remember, I've always been drawn to yoga therapy. It was what I first started studying when I got my certification. Yoga teachers usually start with a 200-hour training, and mine happened to be in yoga therapy. And during the pandemic, I was looking for something to do, as we all were. And I decided to go for my yoga therapy certification, which is a total of 1,000 hours of training in yoga therapy. How yoga therapy differs from regular yoga that you'd find in a studio, maybe with those pretzel poses, is that yoga therapy really focuses on a specific population to serve. We partner with medical professionals to provide yoga in medical settings or for special populations that might need a very specific formula of yoga. And like you said, it's so much more than physical postures. It is breath, it's meditation, it's a philosophy. And so at this time that I was getting my yoga therapy certification during the pandemic, my mom was also dying. And we came upon two modules that I could take. One was bedside yoga, and one was yoga for grief relief. This was right after my mom had passed. And I was like, okay, universe, I hear you. This is the path that I'm supposed to go on. And so I did my yoga certifications. One of the requirements for the bedside yoga was that I reach out to a hospice organization or a place like ABODE where I could find people at the end of life to try some of these techniques on. You and I share a mutual friend named Siobhan Conroy, and I reached out to her because I knew that she loved ABODE. I had remembered her talking about this beautiful home that works with people at the end of life. And so I reached out to her. She introduced me to you. We fell in love instantly. And I started to provide yoga at bedside for the guests of ABODE. and it took off. A lot of staff members and volunteers would come, and we would practice yoga around some of the guests in their hospital beds. They loved it. And so you and I decided that, hey, why don't we train more people to do this kind of work? And thus, the end of life, the ABODE end of life yoga certification was born.
Oh my gosh, and so exciting. We ended up partnering with a yoga studio very nearby called Pure Prana Path. It's beautiful. And we held our first training over the course of 5 weekends, not all weekend long, but they were 5 hours or so on a Saturday and again on Sunday. And Natalie led us through all the training with a couple of wonderful guest speakers, and just beautiful. Yeah, so I would love for our listeners to get yet more of a overview of, it's not, although we did practice some gentle flows, I would say, throughout out the training. It's not all about poses by any stretch. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. In fact, when we are working with people at the end of life, the last thing they're going to want to do is really move their body and exercise. But we would start every class with an invigorating yoga flow, like you said, for the teachers, so that we could all become present. We could all find the connection amongst each other and start to draw on our own internal reservoir, because this work is hard. We're working with people at the end of life that can bring up a lot of emotions in the teachers. And so I definitely wanted to start each training with a nice, it wasn't always vigorous, but a nice flow that we could get our bodies moving, get our brains connected to our bodies, get our breath uniting everything. And then we would sit down and talk about what we had planned to learn that day. And at the end of each day, I would end with a yoga nidra. And for those of you who don't know what yoga nidra is, it is my favorite thing in the world. It's a guided meditation that actually works really well with people at the end of life. For the teachers that were in our cohort, it was a nice opportunity for them to integrate all of the information that they had learned throughout the course of that weekend. And so we would start with a physical practice and end with a beautiful meditation.
Very much so. And it was all very accessible. So for some of us, we like to be on our feet and on our mat. Others may participated from their chairs. So, I mean, there's a big mix of teachers and abilities, all gathered for a common purpose. And I thought it was life changing. And in fact, I always now will use Beverly Tumala. She's a nurse with Trinity Hospice here in San Antonio and is the chair of our board and the head of our education committee. And when we pitched this idea to her, she was cautiously optimistic about it, I guess would be would be the best way to say it. She wasn't quite sure what was going on, but she agreed to try it once or twice and see what she thought, and she loved it. She attended every single session, did all the homework, and now she says that she practices what she's learned when she sees her patients. It's another tool for our toolkit, for our toolbox, for caring for people at end of life. So she's our number one customer success story.
You're so sweet, because you say cautiously optimistic. I would say skeptical. She kind of came in like, all right, what's this all about? I'll see if I like it. And like, now she talks about it any chance she gets. So it just, to me, that's the biggest compliment, is when we can change someone's viewpoint of what yoga is. And you had mentioned, Mary, that yoga is about much more than the physical postures. And I couldn't agree more. Um, it's not a religion, it's not an exercise, although it can be those things as well. But what we taught in this training is more of the philosophy. So, really looking at the stages of dying through a yogic lens, looking at people from a physical standpoint, an energetic standpoint, a mental and emotional standpoint, tapping into their core beliefs. Where do they believe they're going to go after they die? What are their faith foundations? And then finally, and my favorite is what brings them joy? And how can we instill that sense of joy at the end of life, which sometimes we approach with sadness and despair? And how can we use the tools of yoga to really make people comfortable in their bodies, to bring them peace, because a lot of people go through anxiety during this time. And then how do they find that joy and tap into that joy at the end of life?
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. For the longest time, I was doing my own yoga at different studios here in San Antonio. Shout out to the Union and Pure Path. And I always felt that my yoga practice was very separate from what I do in my day to day job. And never saw any opportunity for the two of them to cross paths until in one of my yoga sessions, Beryl Bender was our guest speaker, and she said, yoga is all about being present, being in the present. And I thought, that's that's what we do at Abode. We're in the present. We're in the present at Abode. And I thought, oh wow, well, this changes everything, because then it dawned on me what we do at Abode is yoga. It is yoga. The way we enter a room, the way we carry ourselves, the way we breathe. What's the first thing we do when we enter the world? We breathe. What's the last thing we do when we leave? We take our final breath. Yoga is all about breath. And then the last pose of any yoga session, Savasana, is known as what?
Corpse pose.
Pose. So I thought, well, geez Louise, what a perfect match. And having you at Abode, it just all makes perfect sense. So I'm very excited about this program, and I think it's going to take off. We had a small cohort this summer, which was just perfect. Um, are there other places besides Abode teaching end of life yoga?
There is one, and we'll put this information in the show notes too. It's my mentor, Molly, and she has a training based out of Mexico. It's an online training. She's been doing this for quite a few years, and I think she's also really tapped into the death doula, death cafe landscape. So a lot of the things that I offer Abode, I learned her originally. And this was during my yoga therapy certification over the pandemic time. Molly's just wonderful, just a true kindred spirit. She'd fit right in at Abode. What I love about our training is it takes that, it does kind of a yes and, because we also put the Abode effect on it. So we weave in our contemplative care, that Abode approach of contemplative care. We invite our students to do hands-on training with people who are at the end of life. So our guests at Abode, they really get the benefit of working with our students and experiencing some of these yogic tools. And then the students get an opportunity to be around someone who is close to death. Because I'm telling you, Mary, without that, it can be quite daunting to start this work. It's all well and good to do a training to get a certification, but if you're scared to use it because you've never been around someone at the end of life, it's challenging. So I love that about Abode, and what you and I have created in this program is that people really get the chance to work with someone at the end of life. And that, I think, is worth its weight in gold. We also just have our guest speakers. So Beverly was one of our guest speakers. We had Anthony, our house manager, really talking about a contemplative bedside manner. We had Courtney Sheets, who's one of our wonderful doulas and a local artist. She talked a lot about how to create your own business, how to do an intake form, how to assess the information that you're given, and what kinds of things you can offer people at the end of life, both as a doula and as a yogi doula. And it just made me so happy to see our students really drink everything in and then have that opportunity to process it at ABODE with our guests.
Yeah, so sweet. Just so sweet. I think given how popular yoga has become, and as we all age, as we all, are diagnosed with terminal illnesses, but we have yoga in our lives, we're going to want end of life doulas to have a yoga background, to have yoga as part of their their philosophies and how they provide their support. So by having an abode end of life yoga certification, in addition to your award winning end of life doula certification, I think it will set everyone apart and just add so much value to what we can provide for the world.
I think so. It starts with us, right? And so, what I really learned during this training is the need for the caregivers and the people who are in the death industry to really use the tools of yoga to help themselves process what they see day to day. And so a lot of our students are thinking about offering these yogic tools to hospice teams or to nursing homes or other homes like Abode, and really help the caregivers as well. Because as you can imagine, Mary, the caregivers have such a burden on their shoulders. Some of them are seeing 5, 6 patients a day. And when do they have time to fill their cups? And so this training allows people to distill all of the vast teachings of yoga into something that is actionable. It's something that can be done on a regular basis, kind of a ritual or routine, and really allow caregivers to take care of themselves as well as benefiting the people at end of life.
Perfect, perfect. And we have two cohorts scheduled for next year. You have those dates handy?
I do. I have them right in front of me. So the exciting thing, Mary, is that our first kula, we call it a kula, which is people who practice together. Our first kula will be a virtual offering. So we definitely want to make this available to all of our listeners and anyone who maybe doesn't live in San Antonio, but really sees the benefit of bringing end of life yoga to their life and to the institutions where they can volunteer or work. So the first one will be virtual, and it will be from March 8th to April 6th. So 5 weekends, Saturday and Sunday afternoons. And we'll put all of this information in the show notes too. We encourage people, if they're interested, just to reach out and get more information because we have so many stories to share. And I think there's so many ways that you can use this work. So that is the virtual offering in the spring. And then we'll do an in-person offering at Pure Prana Path, again in San Antonio, for 5 weekends in late July, early August. So July 26th to August 24th. So that's right before Labor Day weekend. Again, 5 consecutive weekends, Saturday and Sunday afternoons. And the nice thing about the in-person offering is that you will have access to Abode as well. For the virtual offering, if you can come in to Abode, if you're somewhat close by but prefer to do it virtually, you can definitely utilize your skills, practice your skills at Abode. But what we'll encourage all members, all students, is that they find some place in their community where they can bring this work. And it just allows us to sow those seeds to really get the word out about caring for people at the end of life and the people who serve people at the end of life.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. And to reach out, what do folks do?
Well, they go to our website, which will be in the show notes. You'll fill out a little application, and then the next step is a phone interview with me. I'll give you a call. We'll discuss your interests and what you hope to get out of this program, go through the details, and then we sign you up. We have some great books that we recommend. In fact, I just want to do a little plug for this book. This book by Pema Chodron, How We Live is How We Die, is so beautiful. It goes through the Buddhist belief about end of life and really tackles the bardos. And so we talk a lot about that in our training. But we also use the yogic tool, and any of you yogis out there might know this term. It's the Panchamaya Kosha model, and a lot of syllables, but it really just distills down the 5 different lenses that we can view the person that we're serving. And so each lens is a way that we can serve them. So the first lens is physical. So that's where we do gentle movement. Maybe the person at the end of life is still alert, can move their body a little bit, and they just want to find some relief from pain or discomfort. And so we explore different ways that we can encourage movement. We do different breath practices, meditations, mudras. Mudra is a hand gesture that allows the person to really center themselves and focus on something specific. And then we go through the other lenses and kind of apply breath practice, movement, centering, meditation, and throw in some other fun little tidbits that people can put in their yogic toolbox. And so when I was offering this at ABODE, we did a lot of the physical practice because who I found I was serving were the staff and volunteers. And then, like I said earlier, we gathered around the dying person's bed. I have this great memory of Ernest. He was my boyfriend. He was everybody's boyfriend. He was a charmer. He was very into the yoga program. I used to offer it every Friday at ABODE. And so every Friday he would ask the staff, "Is it yoga day? Is it yoga day?" And I would come in, I'd bring with me like a bag of scarves, and a lot of volunteers and staff would join us, and we would just spend time with Ernest. We'd do some gentle movements, just rotating the joints a little bit. We'd do some breath practices, some energy work, meditations. And by the end of our session, he would just have the biggest smile on his face. And I think it made all of the volunteers and staff members feel really good. This was a wonderful way that they could connect with Ernest. It made me feel really good because I loved Ernest. And it really seemed like it made Ernest feel really good and maybe more comfortable in his body, more at peace.
It was a wonderful gift.
So these are opportunities. Graduates from our program, you'll be invited to offer these services to people like Ernest at ABODE. And if you don't live in the San Antonio area, this allows you to go out and find people that you serve. So we do a case study at the end of our training because we want to hear how our students applied the knowledge that they learned to either someone at the end of life, someone whose loved one is close to death, so maybe a spouse or a brother, sister, or someone who works in the death care industry. And so it's a wonderful way for people to apply this knowledge, get evaluated on it, see where they can grow, where they can continue to learn, and hopefully plant those seeds in their community.
Excellent. Excellent, Natalie. That's a wonderful overview. And gosh, I hope we get a lot of our listeners to sign up and join us for this very special program. You know, before I go, Natalie, I will just make a point of doing some form of yoga every day, whether it's going to a class, which I love to do, or just remembering to breathe. Breath is Breath's the key to everything. But in our classes, we learn different types of breathing exercises that if you can get in the habit of pulling those out a couple of times a day, you'll find that your day goes a lot more smoothly.
I love that, Mary. Before I go, I'm going to continue diving deep into my yogic studies because I'm like you. I would like to have a yogi doula when it's my turn to go. And so I want to learn as much as I can about how yoga can help people at the end of life, teach and reach as many people as possible, and then hire one of those people to be my yogi doula at the end of my life.
Right on.
Right on. Thank you, Mary, for giving me an opportunity to talk about this training that is so near and dear to my heart. And thank you for making it possible for me to offer this to our students at ABODE.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right, listeners, if you'd like to share one thing you'd like to do before you go, please use the comments. We're always interested in your thoughts, and we appreciate your time.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Before You Go, the official podcast of ABODE Contemplative Care for the Dying.
At ABODE, we believe that death is not a medical event. It's a very natural event. So therefore, we are not offering medical advice. We're simply sharing our experiences and knowledge with you before you go.
Make sure to visit us online at abodehome.org, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and while you're there, click that donate button to help us along. This podcast was edited by Make Your Day Richer.